Fucking Christ.
Hello everyone, and welcome to... God, we're up to episode 36 of Starman and the Boomer now. We started this as... Well, not as a joke, but... I don't know, we weren't quite sure if it turned to a serious thing or not.
Well, it was definitely a hey, do you fancy doing some streams about some stuff? yeah, let's look at broad concepts and things, not just read the news.
Yeah. But no, as you can see, despite last week's slight false start, we have got Mr. Levi on today.
Yeah, I am here.
Yeah, welcome.
Yes, welcome. A lot of people have been... Yeah, a lot of people say my mic quality is a bit low. Let me double check I'm on the right mic here. I don't know. I might just have to fiddle with it a sec. Sometimes OBS can do that, so... yeah. I don't know. I'll see how it goes along. It might be a bit boomy. Is that any better for people at home? Let me know. But yeah, we're actually going to be talking about violence in society, so that should be a very interesting one. And I had a couple of off-air thoughts on the quotes we've got, but we have got some relatively spicy material here.
I'm here as well.
Yeah. Also, yeah. Welcome, Evelyn. You're basically a co-host at this point. You do all of our researching, and you're here all the time. But yes, welcome. So, violence in society. What have we got?
Well, yeah, we've got a couple of quotes here. I don't think we'll start right away. I need to do the YouTubery stuff first.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, we are still actually monetized. Somehow.
Share, and subscribe.
Yeah. I have to. The best way to support is still through Streamlabs. They don't take a bigger cut, but you can give super chats, and you can still join the channel and support us monthly. I don't know how much longer that'll be due to our refusal to stay within the TOS in any way, shape, or form. But it should be at least an interesting stream.
I hope so.
Any updates before we get into the meat of it then?
Not really, no. I suppose we could just kind of start with the one thing that we all agree on is that we all hate libertarians.
Well, yeah, most of them anyway.
Oh no, they're just a bit misguided. I have very often described myself as a libertarian just because
you haven't met the rest of them.
Yes, because exactly. I haven't met the rest of them exactly, and I actually know what needs to be done. I just I think
very, very what needs to be done, Phil. Yes.
Very Hopper standing in front of a set of gallows.
Yes, it would be nice if everyone was nice to each other, but the NAP and various other things are a little wishful thinking, utopian. Isn't it nice? Isn't it nice to want something nice, but it's never nice? Never has a utopia turned out to be anything other than a hellhole. At least for some people. Most people, usually.
So I just quickly change my audio settings there. It's... I don't know, we're going to be going over, as a kind of a primary jumping off point, one of, I guess, what is considered the heretical texts of libertarianism.
Yeah, I don't know if it's maybe worth leading into this with some of the snippets out the article I put up, just because it, the piece we have from Rothbard is it's sort of understood once you understand what you're supposed to be properly up against. And I think that's part of the issue that we all take, is that the vast majority of libertarians are still incredibly naive and don't really understand who they're supposed to be fighting. And they don't even really see it as a fight. They think it's like a disagreement.
I don't know, as a starting point, where do you view the libertarian movement at the moment there, Louis? What is your impression of what's going on that?
I mean, as it stands, it's pretty much disintegrating. I always say that there are plenty of libertarians that are just sort of like your average, normal, everyday libertarians who aren't really that invested in politics, that generally skew right, although they skew left on a bunch of issues that relate to culture or consumption of different things, and that generally libertarians are not really that offensive in their own right, but the problem is that the sort of intelligentsia that once made up libertarians and the sort of leaders of libertarianism, like, they're done, they're gone, they're disintegrating, and it's a movement that has effectively lost all political power in the United States, and if there is any, it's basically bit the bullet and joined the Republican Party.
Yeah, it's things like Cato and Fee and Reason magazine, these sort of institutions that really only exist to support the libertarian stance on, or the supposed libertarian stance on borders, or they make some weird argumentation that you should support egalitarian notions like civil rights despite the existence of the state, which is a total mindfuck to me.
Yeah, there's this great compromise in which they tone down the areas that could be effective, and they amplify the areas that play into the establishment narrative. There's also a lot of optics playing that goes on as well. There's a lot of people who just don't want to look like the bad guys, and they're still obsessed with playing into the kind of the Overton window of the mainstream political debate. But yeah, as a mainstream movement, there are people on the fringes. I mean, you see a lot of the more Hoppian side of things, but that's really almost like effectively broken off.
Yeah.
Like we had a chat with Mr. Pete Aquinas, who was on actually Tim Pool not too long ago, which is kind of weird. Seeing Pete Aquinas, who's a ardent Fed poster.
What a fall from grace to talk to us and then have to talk to the Beanie Man.
The Beanie Man himself, yes, the Beanie Man to read the headlines. But no, it's interesting seeing this split between like what I would call like active libertarians and like passive libertarians almost. But you're right, it's a tiny minority. I'm sure you've also seen this a lot with, conservatives. The vast majority of mainstream conservatives are absolutely useless in terms of knowing what effective action really is.
Yeah, I would say that that's pretty much true. Even those that I've met personally, that they're not really bad people, but in terms of like real politic and anything relating to, the actual process of not just, I don't know, just sort of basic bitch politics. It's just the idea of like tactics, what you should do. They're totally oblivious to any of that. And it's why I think that a lot of the institutions like Cato that you could call libertarian, they've basically abandoned the right, and they're just they've lurched dramatically to the left. And it's like, well, through them, we're still going to have like internationalist and corporate power, so we may as well go with, in their view, the winning team. And I think that that's kind of a sign that says that on the right, that there's a very real problem in understanding how to go forward and actually how to achieve anything in terms of politics.
The biggest sort of center around that problem, and it's something that I've been trying. I mean, the thing that I tried to do in my article somewhat is to separate liberalism from libertarianism. A sort of natural law that is all, for all intents and purposes, maybe even fascist for what it's worth. But this idea of like the NEP, that you shouldn't engage in Machiavellian political action. It's like, why should we neuter ourselves? If these people, these libertarians, these conservatives are just going to kowtow through liberalism to the prevailing sort of consensus leftism, then why should we even bother? Why shouldn't we just be as sort of maniacal as they are?
Yeah, it's the point. It's very... A few years ago, some of the stuff I started seeing, like the Hoppy and Snake memes, which is the gradually degrading version of like communists aren't people, but it's like communists don't respect your rights, so you can't respect their rights.
Yeah.
But it's within the meme, it does communicate like the asymmetrical warfare that goes on, where people think that they can sit down and have a reasonable debate with someone who actually wants them like imprisoned until they have a medical procedure or something like that. That is the state of political debate we're at now.
Well, that's why I took the snippet from Rothbard's Ethics of Liberty, Because even though he says that, in theory you could be justified killing a street urchin that takes, a small item from your store, he then panders to this notion that for some reason the street urchin is eligible to the same standards and for some reason should be engaged, proportionally. Why? He's the scum of the earth.
Yeah.
Never mind leftists who, want to engage in theft on a scale we can't even begin to really picture.
Well, we could actually just get into some of his. There's the article here is it's on LouRockwell.com, but the original one appeared in 1992. I think it was. I'm not sure where it was first actually published, but I'll leave out the first part of the article. It's quite a long one. I'll link it for people to read themselves.
I do like the fact that he calls out the Rothschilds and the Trilateral Commission, though.
Yes, this is considered, like I said, it's considered heretical in libertarian circles. He said a lot of this. But this is Murray Rothbard's A Program for Rightwing Populism. And he basically will go over really what are the 8 points and some of the stuff after that. But I don't know, do you want to go over the first couple of points now and kind of go from there? But he basically says a right-wing populist program.
Well, I think the slash taxes point is very obvious, but I think the slash welfare point, and a grander point in some of the stuff that we've talked about, he's discussing ridding society of the mechanism that creates an underclass, that creates those who are just welfare sponges. If there is no welfare, those people can't exist, and whether they happen to die or improve themselves is of no consequence to us.
Well, yeah, the first 3 points really seem to be like, what should be the minimum starting point for any truly right-wing movement in a modern society?
Theft is wrong, welfare state is bad, and that civil rights is a just abhorrent measure.
Yeah, that there shouldn't be these protected group class privileges. I don't know, Louis, because it was kind of interesting when you first reacted to that. You didn't realize this was written in 1992, which is kind of funny.
No, I didn't. I could have sworn like this was written either like recently. Like I figured this was written in regards to like sort of the Trump populism, and I was genuinely surprised that this was that old because it just was very much ahead of its time, and we're kind of in the same situation, but it's just grown, that much worse over time.
Yeah, It seems to be that a lot of people just have accepted the slow creep, and that all of this seems like incredibly extreme and radical to certain groups of people. And again, a lot of people have gone around calling me an extremist over the past few months.
Sorry, but the one of the main things that I know from my job is just the issue that exists with so many of the government programs that we have, whether it be welfare, any welfare program, or any state agency for the purposes of like law enforcement or homeland security, whatever you want to describe it, but basically national security, how much of it is just this self-perpetuating monster where so much of it has to do on prior terrible decisions that were optional, and that if other decisions were made, I wouldn't have a job. And so many, like tens of thousands of people would not have a job because it would not be necessary to have these agencies. Well, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I'm just sorry. There's a couple of people saying there's an echo on stream, but I can't hear it on my audio.
Yeah, I get the sort of point you're coming down. It's sort of similar to Rothbard's framework of that there is the notion of public goods. He discussed the idea of the public bad.
Yeah,
this sort of notion that anything that government produces, just by the nature of its attempts to work around things like methodological individualism and just the nature of exchange, would just functionally not work. There would always be gaps, there would always be faults, it would never function as it's supposed to, because by its very nature it can't. So you end up with, as you're describing these sort of systems, it's the same point Tucker Carlson was talking about Ted Kaczynski on his show last night, that you have these systems that eventually, once they get to a certain size and a certain sort of propensity, that all they do is exist to preserve themselves. They have no other function past that point.
Well, sorry. I wanted to say that all I can say is that if you look at the welfare programs and you look at several different state agencies, they simply exist as a direct consequence of our immigration policy. And one of the wildest things, and I've yet to do a video on it to sort of like go through the training that I had and like, okay, why are we here? What is our mission? And it's like, all of this is because of our immigration. All of this. And it's just like, unless you actually change that, these agencies are only ever going to grow in size and power. And it's like, well, is that the reason? Is that the reason for the immigration that we have? Is that it's basically continuously growing and centralizing power to the federal state?
Yes.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot of C.A. Bond's work on the juvenile, and he sort of uses that framework to discuss how you have a sort of central power, something akin to the state, periphery powers such as welfare, state agencies, large corporations, and then, that's the secondary powers, and then the periphery is everything that exists outside. And the centre can't grant itself more power by appealing to secondary aspects. It must appeal to ever further out peripheries. So, first off, it appeals to, the proletariat, or it appeals to universal suffrage, and then it appeals to the working class, and then it appeals to the international working class and granting state benefits to anyone and everyone that can arrive, because it's one more person, it's one more sort of mind that is set on the central state being the power that keeps it all going.
I will say we have before we go on to the next point, I have a few donations here which I'll read out. Neil Morgan donated $5 and said, "Good evening, guys. What are your thoughts on the upcoming Rittenhouse trial? What is the implication of a guilty verdict?"
Well, first of all, he did nothing wrong.
Well, even if he shot first, he still did nothing wrong, because just ideologically being a communist justifies self-defensive actions up to death upon you.
Being a communist is a form of violence.
Communist pedophiles.
Yeah,
So I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself.
Yeah. There's an echo in here. No, there is. But I've heard that apparently the prosecution has been making an arse of it. But I truly believe that there is no political, outcome to this trial that isn't a guilty verdict. It has to be politically.
I don't know, because I think that's on the level of. I know we say it like every other time something happens, but surely people would just be outraged at that. A man actually defended himself from a paedophile communist in the street.
Nah, I gotta disagree. I would put money on a guilty verdict and him getting fucked.
Yeah, I think that they're just gonna do it as like a head on a pike.
Yes, exactly.
And when they do that, nothing will happen.
Yes.
No, you're probably right. I think that the last 18 months has proved that there is no line.
There is no line. No.
Yeah, there's no line, and people buy into the propaganda of the media. It's so stupid how sheepish people are. Like, people, like when Derek Chauvin was found guilty of both accidentally and purposely killing George Floyd, and how those are mutually exclusive, charges, and he was found guilty of both. No one cares that they're contradictory. No one cares.
No, it was a political decision, not a judicial.
And it's good. And this kid has been demonized as basically like a Nazi terrorist, and I'm not using the word in any other way to describe what I think generally, like the average mooing member of the public thinks of this kid, that he is a legit like Nazi terrorist.
Yeah, that's what the headlines have said. But I'm getting a few more questions here. So, like I said, I think it's going to be a guilty verdict, honestly.
If this kid was like the child of someone that was worth like $100 million, he'd stand a good chance. But because he's some kid of some Joe Jagoff, he's got no chance. He's fucked.
Fair point.
James Wayne donated $5. I don't understand the libertarian obsession with the nap. We'll go over your article second. I think that makes more sense.
Yeah, if you want to.
Following the nap means that you can't lynch the nonce until he's already bent over a kid. Yeah, it's a suicide pact essentially, and that's one of my and I guess yours, well, all of ours here, really major problems with like libertarian theory is the idea that you cannot proactively in any way defend yourself; it can only be reactive. Sam Bowden donated £2 and said, sorry, Paul donated £2 and said Sam Bowden is a neo-lib. It genuinely scares me. A lot of people who are supposedly on the right seem to be neo-libs, unfortunately. Neocons and neo-libs are just basically the same thing.
They are the same thing.
They're trolls.
They're masquerading as two different things, but I think you have to be blind at this point not to realize that they are literally the same side. They're what's called the uniparty. Like they are the same faction. They're just pretending to be something different for the sake of having controlled opposition for both sides.
Mr. M donated $10, thank you for that, and said violence is the supreme authority from which all authority is derived. Pastor Louis, allegedly.
I would say that that's kind of like, it's just a truism to say that, because all governments, irrespective of what they are based on basically conceptual violence.
It's all property relations. It's all power relations.
It's relations.
It's the fact that I can remove you from my property under my auspices because it's my property, and I will use violence to do so if I feel appropriate. It is the method by which we found society upon.
Yes.
We'll get into that a bit more later. That's kind of where we're going with the discussion, to be honest, about the role of violence in society. But
let's not put the cart before the horse.
Yeah, let's not put the conclusion before the meat there. Radical Liberation donated to those and said, "This libertarian anarchist loves Zoe, thank you." Matthew Ivy with the $5. Stop bullying the milquetoast libertarians and get one on top.
I stood up for them. I stood up for them.
Like the fat leaf or his genetic dead end of a cow. Oof.
Disavow.
None of those people will talk to me. Like
Same
honestly,
here.
like not seriously. Like you've had the same experience I've had, Louis. But there have been like people who said they talked to me, even people who are a bit more rational in their beliefs, who are a bit more on side with a lot of this stuff, and they never materialize. It's not like there's been like conflicts and been trying to do it and people have been busy and been working with me. No, nothing ever comes out of it. They never set a time, they never set a date, they never make an attempt to set it up. I've had lots of people basically challenge me to the halls of debate online and then just nothing. Not a thing. So I would like to get those people on to challenge directly, but like quite frankly, they seem scared of it. So
yes,
so that's have them on to call them disgusting fucking faggots.
Yeah.
that's like I said, I think it's honestly, I've had a few interactions like that, and it's just like a general, as far as I can tell, having to pick their brain a little bit and sort of look into their mind a little bit. It's just a general cowardice in that you can't defend your positions.
No, I think a lot of people have also been put in this place where they feel they can't say certain things, even if they do actually believe them. And the logical conclusions of their public beliefs currently are these things. They're convinced that their income will dry up if they actually say it.
Well, I think it's nice to have things like sort of the articles we're reading here as almost like useful tools to point at and be like, do you support this? And will you say it publicly? Because if you don't, I'm not interested. I mean, I think we might want to continue on.
Yes, I was going to say we're going to continue on now.
There's I think, is it 4? Is it?
Yeah, I'm going to say 4 and 5 are the big ones that make a lot of libertarians like pull up the collar and be like, I disavow.
I mean, I want to say there is elsewhere. There are articles where Lou Rockwell plays on this sort of idea of take back the streets, crush the criminals, and I swear he basically just suggests rid society of ethnic gangs.
Yeah,
because that's something that needs to be said here until they're all gone.
I mean, yeah, it's.
Just to stop for a second, to slash taxes and slash welfare implies you're in control in the first place, though.
Well, it does, yes.
Yeah, I know, but this is a what to do when you've won kind of scenario. There's steps to get there, but certainly slashing taxes. If you slash taxes, a lot of that falls into place anyway. The banksters at the bottom don't get their government support programs.
The Gibbs.
But
I
taking
think
back
that's
the
why-
streets
point-
is absolutely essential. It's just there's methods on how to do it. It doesn't have
Well,
to
there's-
be.
There's these two here. I just like the way how unambiguously worded it is.
Yes.
He just says, "Take back the streets, crush the criminals," and I mean, of course, not white-collar criminals or insider traders, but violent street criminals, robbers, muggers, rapists, murderers. Cops must be unleashed and allowed to administer instant punishment, subject, of course, to liability when they are in error.
I agree completely with that. I mean, number 4 is basically the cornerstone of my fucking philosophy, really.
Joggers in the slammer, collar popped.
Well,
No, not even that.
It does have Judge Dredd sort of tinges to it, though. But
Yes.
again, not saying this is necessarily a bad thing. But yeah,
You
Be
have to
careful
remember,
with what you unleash.
this is something being said by a man who's considered like the saint of the libertarian movement.
I do like the Hopper continuation point from this, which is like, don't even like get the cops to do it. Do it yourself.
Yeah.
Like, actually engage in like anti-leftist guerrilla warfare.
I mean, I'm kind of with him there. I mean, the police are corrupted. Unleashing and taking back the streets needs very radical action. By and large.
Well, the next point is take back the streets, get rid of the bums. Again,
Yeah, I completely agree with that as well.
Again, unleash the cops to clear the streets of bums and vagrants. Where will they go? Who cares? Hopefully they will disappear. That is, move from the ranks of the petted and corseted bum class to the ranks of the productive members of society. And again, this is something that the mainstream libertarian movement doesn't have the stomach for.
Well, mainstream politics doesn't have the stomach for. I mean, I think largely what Rothbard's doing here, he's not suggesting that this is the policies we must implement when we are in power.
Yeah.
He's more so suggesting that, like, we can't stop until, for example, the police go out and crush criminals and get rid of the bums in an effective manner. And until that is done, we will not,
Yeah. I don't know.
All I got to say is this as well, is that one of the major problems in urban environments is these twos, 4 and 5, and when you actually handle these things aggressively, it dramatically improves the entire city. It has a demonstrable positive effect. And the problem is that, like, it's pretty much the meme that I have, but it's why I don't like the idea of, whether it's right wing or left wing, the idea of compassion being some kind of like overarching philosophy of how you govern. It's like, no, because it results in a demonstrably worse environment and more victims, more innocent people are victimized when you govern in that fashion. And bums are a part of it.
it's the curse of the word altruism.
Yeah.
It is always used. It is always used again in this notion of sort of liberal indifference. That is altruistic for us not to act upon the criminals.
Yeah.
However, at the same time, they upend every individual within society's ability to deal with the criminals too.
Yes.
So you just end up with the worst of both worlds.
Well, what's implied, and you're right, it's elaborated on by Hopper. We don't have the quotes here, but he basically says that subject, of course, to liability when they are in error. He's basically talking about essentially how this would function is you would deputize a whole bunch of people, but they don't have qualified immunity. It's basically you go out there, you go as far as you think you can go, but if you fuck up, that's on you.
Mm.
And it's a very, like I said, a lot of people consider it a very bleak view of what needs to be done. But the idea that you can't just get like the majority of law-abiding citizens together in a neighborhood to walk around and like beat the drug dealers up and tell them to leave, or next time they won't be breathing.
How do people think we engaged in the setting of standards and security in society before Robert Peel came along? Did we just allow people just get murdered in the street and we sat there and went, oh, what a shame, I wish we could do something about that. We didn't invent police.
It's the idea that modern policing, like the hands-off kind of super legalistic, extremely hobbled, extremely
social care
bureaucratic
workers.
Yeah, the idea that these are, social care workers that do paperwork and carry a gun is completely foreign I posted them on Twitter a little while ago, but there's a great, actually, it can be a bit rambling sometimes, the great interaction between like actually Moldbug and Michael Malice, where he talks about like the ugliness in society and how we tolerate all of this.
And the homeless industrial complex.
The homeless industrial complex. Because I went on a bit of a rant about this on Twitter about the fact that most visible homeless people you see, in fact, no, all visible homeless people you see are drug addicts, they are violent criminals, or they're being run by an organized gang. Because both in the US and the UK, there is a surplus of shelter beds. And there has been for possibly, I think, the last 30 years. Anyone who is sleeping on the street is choosing to be there. And, you know, by enabling them, you are perpetuating human misery. And by forcing them to go elsewhere, you are actually doing them a service because they might sort their life out if you tell them to leave.
There is a compromise in this that it just frustrates me because of all, you know, of the other side that considers itself to be, you know, altruistic, compassionate, that sort of thing. It's like, if you wanted to have a compromise, it would basically be institutionalizing these people and saying, you're not doing this. We're going to try to straighten you out. We need to get your mind right, etc., etc. You're not doing this. We're not tolerating your presence like this. You need to sort yourself out, and we'll help you through the taxpayer, blah, blah, blah. But we're not accepting this anymore. But the problem is that that is not acceptable for the people on the other side of this issue. They see it as enabling them. That's the compassionate thing to do, is to enable these people.
It's because the opposite does look, or could have the potential to look like state slavery for being homeless. Just scooping people up, putting them in an institution, and, you know, putting them to work and teaching them to be humans.
That's why we'll put them in private workhouses instead, because private slavery is better than public slavery. This is why chattel slavery is better than socialism.
In an ethical sense, you can make that argument, yeah. But the idea is that if you, as a community, do not tolerate these people, they will go away. They will not exist.
Yes.
If you, as a people, are allowed by the government and the police force, you know, if the police force actually was on your side, these problems would not exist.
Yes.
It seems self-evident, but it's true that, you know, all these people are allowed to exist and they are allowed to do what they do. That, you know, the majority of people do not want them there. The majority of people are not part of the criminal class.
It shows how far law enforcement is away from what its role and remit should be.
Oh, absolutely.
It has become a decivilizational force.
Yeah.
Yes.
As we've discussed, you know, it exists to keep crime going, almost like a business. It self-perpetuates.
I also don't understand how you could be something like an anarcho-capitalist and not be incredibly excited about the idea of riding around your neighborhood and shooting all the drug dealers. Because that is like ultimate praxis.
It's also
I would say
IRA.
Because they want to be a drug dealer, that's why.
Nah, because most of them are too pussy for that as well, to be honest.
Yeah.
Probably so, but I think that that's what they imagine it to be. Like, these people, you know, anarcho-capitalists, they have to accept hedonism and everything, like vice. Anything that would be vice, they would have to include
true.
it.
Absolute property rights allows you to essentially suggest that in this town,
we are the landowners.
Yeah, sodomy is illegal, and if we catch you or we hear the fact that you've been sodomizing on your property because that property is under a lease agreement with the community, out you go.
The thing is, I'd say the vast majority, though, of people who consider themselves narco-capitalists do not hold that view.
Well, yeah, it's not that they don't ethically have a way to go around stopping it. It's that it doesn't come to their mind.
Well, yeah, he's in talking about Hopkins in the chat, that's true, but I think a lot of people who are, you know, the lolbuts, the poster child of this, do not understand...
People that read David Friedman.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do not understand the logical implications of their own worldview, because they like to trade in niceties.
Yes.
Anyway, Trig, do you want to read point 6 and 7? Because I think you'll enjoy those.
Okay. Yeah, no, I've been enjoying 6 a lot already. So, yeah, abolish the Fed. Attack the banksters. Money and banking are recondite issues, but the realities can be made vivid. The Fed is an organized cartel of banksters, yes they are, who are creating inflation, ripping off the public, destroying the savings of the average American, setting themselves up illegally, and all manner of nastiness. The hundreds of billions of taxpayers handouts to the S&L bankers will be chicken feed compared to the coming collapse of the commercial banks, probably. Number 7 is America First, the key point. Not
Yes.
meant to be a 7th priority. The American economy is not only in recession, it is stagnating. The average family is worse off now than it was 2 decades ago. Come home, America. Stop supporting bums abroad. Stop all foreign aid, which is aid to banksters and their bonds and their exporter industries. Stop global only.
Global only.
And let's solve our problems at home. Yeah, very much so. The idea of locking yourself, sort of, basically going back to the Monroe Doctrine would be fantastic for America.
I don't think it's necessarily quite that. I think it's also, once again, that Rothbard is conscious, at least I think he's somewhat conscious of de Juvenel's thinking. You know, in those 2 points, you have the clear connection where global financial capital appeals to the farthest away remnants of, you know, periphery society, the poor in Africa, and the AIDS epidemic, and the children working in the sweatshops. Yeah. So that all the focus of US policy, all the focus of US taxpayer money, and all the focus of possibly even US industry at the same time is all focused on helping the human rights of people who don't even exist in the country. And at the same time,
until we bring them here.
Until you,
yeah. But it even goes to that extent, though, that these people are then brought to your own nation and given a privileged position there above the residents.
And the money you're sending over abroad could be used to sort out the problem of the bums if it's a real problem. Rejuvenate cities, recreate the country. It would work in England as well. In fact, it would work better in England more rapidly. The amount of money we send abroad is staggering.
It's a bit of a shame he doesn't mention it in here. But I think these 2 points tie brilliantly to the idea of the American Empire. I mean, the modern American Empire from even World War I and World War II has been enshrined in the idea of humanitarianism and international altruism, and spreading democracy around the world. You know, that it would seem, I mean, there's obviously a lot more words to be had on secession than just a small article like this, but it would seem to me that, especially in America, if your goal is any form of dignity or, you know, sovereignty in any meaningful sense, you would want to collapse the American federal government.
And reform it in a way that
you just don't. You just allow states to do as they please. And if California and Texas and New York want to turn into abject shitholes, people in the surrounding states can stand on their borders armed and say, well, you fuck that place, you can stay there.
The very, very national divorce.
Complete balkanization and destruction of the Union at that point, though.
Well, the American state is the biggest force of sort of leftist ideology on this planet.
Yes.
Nothing spreads neoliberalism and fucking paused social liberalism amongst the globe like America.
Well, there is the point the federal government had very little remit when it was first formed. It was basically an arbitration service for the states in many cases. Same with the Supreme Court.
I would argue international business is as guilty, whether or not that's reacting to the market force of places like America, or whether or not they're doing it themselves of their own volition as well.
It's through constitutional law in America that they've done what they did. I mean, it's the stuff that the Juvenile talks about in regards to the founding of the American federal state. Was the federal state appealed to the people within states over states' rights? So they had this wider majority of, you know, those who cared about their own fake liberty, in a sense whereby their rights were not guaranteed by government, in a federal sense, not guaranteed by the governor that stayed up the road.
Well, there's a point that was made of her that the America First bit especially could have been written at any point from about 1950 to now. That has been the default state of American policy in the post-war era. And it's quite funny again to see someone like Rothbard again. I get the poster child of all of these libertarians, really, unless they're extremely out there, and basically not libertarians. And he's making a point that is incredibly, like, in terms of modern parlance, would be considered Trumpian.
Well, it would basically be, in my view, anti-libertarian. Libertarianism, from my standpoint, is just internationalist by default.
It does have an open borders kind of edge to it, though, doesn't it?
That's the problem, is that those are the people who took over the libertarian movement in the 90s, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. The perception from the outside is that the open borders libertarians have the loudest voice. And the libertarian movement, no matter how you define it, has lost control of its own message in many ways.
Yes.
It has been subject to rank entryism.
Well, funnily enough, 92, maybe, I don't know if Radlib's still in chat, he'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong in this. 92 is the year that I think Rothbard gets kicked out of the Cato Institute, despite the fact that he set it up for saying things, like this, that borders have some form of meaning, and that libertarianism can't just look past culture as some form of side effect to society.
No wonder he was kicked out.
Yeah.
Now, what's your view of the Federal Reserve then? Are you red-pilled on abolishing the Fed, or?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that as it relates to the Fed, I mainly look at it with a sort of general indifference that it exists, and the question of what you'd replace it with, and basically the question of does it actually work. And I would say that basically once upon a time you could say it did, but the effects of it at this point are so terrible for the general public that it's basically the question is whether it would have the capacity to reform itself, and I doubt it does. It's basically since, I guess, I'd have to look up when it started basically creating like trillions of dollars for itself, when exactly that was.
Basically immediately.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that the question is what can be done with it. That is it necessary to get rid of it, or because I'm saying I don't know.
Yeah, there's some great reading you can do about the interactions between the Federal Reserve and World War One.
I don't know. I could maybe give my best opinion on the question of economics, seeing as how it's something I've studied for years. Nobody really has a clue at the end of the day, and the only solution to things like the Federal Reserve is a complete and global financial and technological collapse.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing that I in talking about the collapse of the United States, like, I would rather avoid that, because the thing that I'm always afraid of in terms of any sort of like the accelerationist sort of thing that people feel about the United States is the inexplicable. It's not just what you can perceive could happen, should that happen. It's the things that no one's really thinking about that could happen. And I worry about that, because you never know that things are bad now, but they could always be intensely worse, because you don't know who's going to be picking up the pieces afterward. And I just fear that
that's
go on.
The point, is you smash it so much that the pieces cannot be reconstructed. It's the point that the Hopper makes, it's the point that Lenin makes, it's the point that Ted Kaczynski makes, it's the point that so many people make. The real solution to so many of these things is reducing them to dust and then forgetting that they ever existed. And anytime anyone mentions that these things existed, you eradicate them.
Look, all I'm saying is America.
The maximalist view.
America before 1910 was doing just fine without the Fed. Some might argue it was on a better footing.
I mean, it's just kind of strange how, if you look at American history, speaking as an American, but prior to basically, I guess, Reconstruction, that was pretty much when it changed, that it was a purely isolationist nation. And there wasn't any real idea of it becoming something other than that. But it seems that the ambitions of the people that existed then of growing and taking more land and seizing more assets and using that to basically grow itself from there, well, let's open the borders. We need labor. We need to industrialize quicker. And unfortunately, like, I don't even have, like, an argument or a belief against American hegemony. Like, I'm not really against the entire notion of it, but the problem is that, like, my conception of it has basically been taken by people that wouldn't even bother wiping their ass with the United States Constitution, or,
Would you suggest that the South is occupied territory, though?
No, I would say that the South, any conception of what it used to be is gone, and that the people that claim otherwise, that wear or fly, what is it, the Dixie flag, like, they're just LARPing.
Abraham Lincoln isn't a dirty communist tyrant in your eyes.
Well, he's a tyrant, but I'm not necessarily, the question is, I mean, W's and L's, and he claimed the W, so is
the problem is that the American South got so destroyed in the subsequent years, and its culture got, like, so reduced that there is no real hope of
one of the things is that there are, like, an unbelievably large number of foreigners that live in states like Georgia. I can speak to that firsthand, that an unbelievably large percentage of the population of Georgia is just straight up foreigners. And it's like, is that state still Southern, quote unquote? Like, if the white population's 50%, is it Southern? It's just, the South has changed radically over the last 50 years. And like I say, the people who fly, like, the Dixie flag and the Confederate flag, I find it just to be one big LARP. Like, I don't think it's real at all. There's some fucking faggot in my neighborhood who's not from the South that flies a Confederate flag. What does it even mean? It's something that's gone. And the issue with the South currently is whether it's going to remain red. And I think that it's just one of those, it's the Texan big boots, big dick arrogance of, well, we're going to be red forever. Yes, we're importing fucking half of India to come here, but we're going to be red forever. And it's like, I don't know. I really wish the right wing would sort itself out, because, like, the culture of the South at this point is basically, that of, like, whatever the capital of India is. Like, that's the culture of Georgia at the moment.
It's very Mumbai post, right? You want to say something there, Trig? I heard you in the background.
I was going to say, would naming it the War of Northern Aggression versus the Civil War be a better way of phrasing it? Because I do know a few Georgians and Texans and so on that might disagree with some of your assessments there, but that might.
Yes, because they're arrogant. That's why.
It's also because they got invaded and then replaced with niggers.
Yeah, they basically just got replaced by, like, 15 different.
No, they were there. They were there.
They were already there.
Well, they got just replaced with, like, even, like, mega, like, Somalis.
Well, no, but see,
they were just unchained.
They had them contained. They had the breeding controlled. They'd all been all right, but you had to let them off into the wild.
Well, there's a joke in the American context. It's like the homeland of all African Americans or whatever, Black Americans, and it's Atlanta. Like, that's the joke.
Well,
because it's true. Because I know, like, all the black people that I know, even the ones in this area that have been here for quite a while, they originally came from Atlanta.
Well, I love the whole, it's like Grant Samuelson or something like that, who's like a 19th century, like, American writer who was big into, like, writing pro-slavery articles and stuff, that he basically described Black American culture in its fruition as, like, a corrupted and bastardized, like, cavalier Scottish culture. So that's why they all drink bourbon and, like, eat fried meat.
I did get a couple of donations a little bit ago, so I'm going to make sure I read those before they get too out of date there. Matthew Ivy with the $10 said, "I'm glad to see a Louis Lefed on stream with other YouTubers I like. Louis, I know you're busy spying on people, but I think you can find something interesting, productive. You can find some interesting, productive talks with AA, Scrump and Company." Louis Lefed. People are big on that one here. And Dirty's King donated $5 and said, it's conflating the systematic and situational homelessness is what helps what sell it to the public. All right, yeah, it's talking about the homeless industrial complex there. But yeah, that is a big lie to the public. But thanks again for the donations.
What was the I think it was the last point on the article? I'm trying to remember, was it a family values thing?
Yeah. If we continue to talk about there's defend family values, and then there's the 2 points at the end, which I think are
if I'm right in saying there's like a lot of really good points in this that is just kind of hilarious.
Well, this one's very relevant because of some of the discussion this week, in that a large part of quote-unquote anti-SJW YouTube has gone full, like, you can't say we need traditional values. There's been a lot of reeing about the Astilian...
Well, it's honestly, in my view of, like, that conception of the anti-SJWs, I honestly think that there's a pretty even split. That there's a lot of people that went down the road of basically nihilism, and that there's a good chunk of people that have basically veered off and have basically said, no, traditional values have a purpose, they need to be defended, we're raising the cross, Christ is king. Like, even if it is more like a colloquial thing, but I like I say, the anti-SJW thing, it's been a split, honestly. That's the divide, is that the people that have basically said, no, we should not abandon these things, there's a positive side to this, and those that are saying, fuck it all, tear it all down, because, I don't know, I want to be in a fucking orgy and I'm a degenerate.
It's kind of hilarious, though, that I think one of the points that Rothbard makes here, that an atheist Jew has to tell Americans that the First Amendment, but that means that the public schools must allow prayer, and we must abandon the absurd left atheist interpretation of the First Amendment, that the establishment of religion means not allowing prayer in public schools or a creche in schoolyard or public square at Christmas, which is him essentially making the point that as soon as you detach the Constitution from God, it's meaningless. It's material liberal garbage.
Yeah, it's something I talked about. I gave a speech in August at an event, and one of the things I talked about was that the US Constitution is underpinned on everybody being a Christian.
Yeah.
And if people in society don't believe in the Bible and don't believe in Christian values, the US Constitution is meaningless.
It must be a given.
Yeah, but the point 8, defend family values, I'll read it in full, just says, which means get the state out of the family and replace state control with parental control. In the long run, this means ending public schools and replacing them with private schools. But we must first realize that voucher and even tax credit systems are not, despite Milton Friedman, transitional demands to the path to privatize education. Instead, it will make matters worse by fastening government control more totally upon private schools. He's actually kind of dissing a lot of the attempts to make these halfway house charter schools, because all it does is end up with private schools being ever more governed by the government, which is what's happened here in the UK. Within the sound alternative is decentralization and back to a local community neighborhood control of the schools.
Well, it was the failure of those policies that brought Sowell more on side with Austrians, as much as he was still part of the Chicago school.
Yeah.
He separated a lot from that because he understood that these charter school programs, unless they were entirely community run, were an utter shit show.
Yeah, they end up just as paused as a public school.
Yes.
What's worse, because they've got more money, more reach, more people involved, and then normally become a more centralized school in the process. Which means you have less choice and a larger sort of mass psychological upbringing.
Well, in terms of like morality and traditional values, Lee was talking about like the split that's been seen, but recently a lot of people are going as far as to say that, you shouldn't instill values in children. There's this myth.
Oh, like, I just love that shit, because it's not like the other side is fucking going around indoctrinating as much kids as possible in fucking everything. Give me a break.
Well, it's you can't have like morally neutral education. Children need to be taught what is moral, and it should be something that's positive. They need to be taught what it means to be a man and a woman, and that should be, the traditional view of what a man and a woman are, because that is like biologically coded into us. Outside of a few corner cases.
Shut up.
that have been used as a massive wedge into society. As someone who has spent like the last 5 years immersed in that side of things, let's say, that it is apparently like it is so apparent that all that rhetoric is horse shit about all of that, and that most people you'll talk to who are like the few exceptions to being completely comfortable with being in that, being a man or a woman, will completely tell you that what you're instilling in people is wrong much of the time. It's been eye-opening over the past couple of years to see people default to this position that they just want to be a hedonist, and they do not think morality in a real sense exists to them.
Well, yeah, no, it's like a direct follow-on from the types of sort of detached and unorientated materialist liberalism. I mean, part of what Rothbard is writing here, even though she was dead a number of years, he might as well have just dug Ayn Rand's corpse up and paraded it around, being like, look at the state of this bin. She basically supported everything that we have nowadays.
It's like I said, the idea that you can have or should support an atheistic society in an abstract sense is ridiculous, because even if you are an atheist, you need to realize that morality is something that a populist needs, even if you want to do it in a Machiavellian sense.
The populist needs a canon through which they can understand things.
Yeah, it's been one of the hard things that I think a lot of, like I said, I'm thinking of Matt Christensen, for example, who was an anti-SJW, who's now like a Christian and married and yada yada yada. That basically the problem with like the concept of like societal or state atheism is that for a lot of people you're basically creating a hole in a person.
Yeah.
And the question is basically what fills that hole, and it's either people like Matt who default back to Christianity, or myself, for example, where I'm a lot friendlier to Christianity now than I was a few years ago, but I would say that it's basically, it's still like a general kind of ethos based around Nietzsche, but I think a lot of that is backed by like Christian, concepts and values.
I've been having a lot of, again, arguments with people, and essentially just, I don't know, calling people godless is kind of funny, just because of how people tend to react to it. But the idea that a lot of these people don't have any level of inner spiritual life is disturbing.
Well, that's why I use the phrase orientation. I think even Evola goes on to the realms of using that phrase, and it sort of has sort of tacit support of a vague form of Christianity, is that most people are not capable of orientating themselves.
Yeah.
They must be orientated by some story or some myth. And that is either, for the most part, Christianity or some gay, faux Jewish materialist thing about the progressive arc of history.
It's...
Fuck that polytheism. Go back to Roman polytheism or Nordic.
No.
Nordic's fun.
No.
Well, at least, at the very least, people need to have a belief in the world that is not purely just material. I think that's one of the great issues in like a modern state in which people are vacuous, and many of them are just consciously sat waiting to die.
It is no sort of mystery why those who don't see things on a higher spiritual plane can't engage with the concepts of a sort of a good and evil.
Yeah.
They cannot see the world in a sense of, the right being orientated by the good against the left's evil.
And it's why, as well, like, the left is itself, like, whether consciously or not, just its own morals are just evaporating by the fucking day, and just every day that passes, they're becoming more and more, and I think it was Sargon, Carl on his own channel, where they were debating, like, saying good or evil, like, using those kind of terms. But it's like, once you abandon that concept, you're going down the road of being evil and being totally unaware of that fact, because you've abandoned any concept of what is actually morally right or wrong.
It's one of the large themes about the article I wrote that we'll get into But that appeal to an existential good or evil is a core part of politics. If you do not play that game, you will just, as you said, you will just get caught up in it.
Yeah,
there is no neutral. It only exists in the abstract.
We'll get into that a bit later on, because we're getting into some of the nature of the political stuff, some of the Carl Schmitt stuff. But you are completely correct in that, like, leftists in general have a religious belief in themselves and in their rhetoric. That is what has replaced God in these people.
Yes.
That is consciously what Marxism does. It replaces God with man and instills the idea that there can be paradise on earth through the shared brotherhood and through the managing of resources by these magical societal means. That is what it is. And it is not something that is rational. You cannot debate these people because it's not something that they have reasoned themselves into.
No.
It's something that they believe, and it defines them.
Yeah.
In a theistic way. And like the opposite of that is you need to have that, but you need to have that in something that is good. You need to have that in the idea of, man under nature, man as free in the natural world.
Something to put, constraints on yourself at the very minimum. Forget about society, but yourself.
The appeal to something like a soul or an inherent dignity.
Yeah, the just wholesale rejecting the idea of man as animal and all the nihilism that comes with it.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know. It's getting very literally past the Louis now, but it's.
Well, I'll follow up and say that in sort of one of the arguments, like I just mentioned, that was on Carl's podcast was about hating your opposition, but it's like it's not even a concept of hate. It's the fact that the left has become, through their own self-debasement, whether conscious or not, is that they are disgusting. They are repulsive. Forget about hate. They're disgusting. Like, what do you want me to say? Like, that's how they are, and I think it's totally fine to recognize it, because it recognizes in yourself that we actually have some goddamn standards over here.
Yeah, if they weren't so evil, we would actually maybe even consider pitying them.
Well, if they weren't so evil, they wouldn't be leftists. The study of history No, I'm serious. That's not a joke.
I know.
You beat me to it, to be
honest. Through the
honest.
study of history, and through the democratization stuff we've done, I begin to realize that the left has never, being amoral is their greatest strength.
Yes.
Yeah.
They are pragmatic to the extreme. One of the examples I always give people is Woodrow Wilson in the 1920s is the architect of federal law enshrining Jim Crow into the culture of America. He is a white supremacist in the extreme in terms of his legal procedure when it came to being president and in his legislative program. But not, 40 years later, you get Lyndon Johnson, who is the man who creates the civil rights framework in America. And he flips the idea on his head. He is no longer appealing to the white majority. Is no longer appealing really to the kind of Protestant ethic of America that existed under Woodrow Wilson. What he is doing is using the American government as a cudgel to destroy people's property rights and their freedom of association.
Not just that, though. At the same time, both of them are appealing to the sort of materialist myth of it is American to be in support of Jim Crow, and then people who are still within living memory of that then have to be told that it is now American to accept black people.
And if you look at leftism, these things are entirely compatible within it, because it is not about the material reality of policy. It is about the grand movement upwards of gaining power.
Yep.
And both of those things, in their moments of history, were able to gain those presidents power. And, there is no actual belief system if you look at what, establishment leftists in power do. There is no, moral absolutism. They don't have anything they will not do. And they don't have anything they won't appeal to if they think it will give them power. It is raw power politics, and recognizing that is the only way to deal with them. You can't only not assume they're honest actors, you must always assume they are Machiavellian actors, because that is what their entire worldview is predicated on.
It's not even I would say for some it's actively conscious, but a lot of them it's not. A lot of them it is just animal instincts and cowardice and how they just slink around.
It's the arena that they are playing in. It is the nature of politics to act in this manner. To be political is to essentially assert that our group is the good group, that group over there is the bad group, commence battle in whatever form.
It is. And I was talking about leftist elites, really. I'm talking about the people who are on the upper strata. When you look at leftists in power, you're right that a lot of the foot soldiers are just morally lost. And I've spoken to some of these people at length, and they are just horrendously broken people who are not capable of understanding what their own thoughts are, never mind having a consistent kind of worldview within themselves. And they get sucked up in this essentially moral pantomime in which they are shown with sock puppets the evil capitalist and the brave proletariat, and that is the extent of their political
Is that
thought.
where we get the piano machine out?
But that's, again, to get back to what we're talking about, that's really what Rothbard's talking about here. He basically goes on to slap around every leftist libertarian at the end of this, and says, for every one of these right-wing populist programs is totally consistent with a hardcore libertarian position. But all real-world politics is coalition politics. And there are other areas where libertarians might well compromise with their paleo or traditionalist or other partners in populist coalition. For example, family values, take on the vexed problems of pornography, prostitution, or abortion. Here, pro-legalization, pro-choice libertarians should be willing to compromise on the what does that say?
Decentralist.
Yeah, decentralist stance. Sorry. That is to end the tyranny of the federal courts and to have the problems up to states and, better yet, localities and neighborhoods. That is to community standards. He's basically saying, like, even if you don't believe in these things, like, hold your nose and beat the leftists to death with them, which is an incredibly salient thing to say.
Well, see, that is the pertinent question. Why is it that these people will not hold their nose?
Yeah,
that is a very good question, but it's the question that I have that I don't get a good response to. I don't know whether it's just flexing, or putting up a face, a front rather, to say, like, well, I'm still a good person. Please think of me as a good person, like an appeal to popularity for themselves, or what it is that actually motivates them. But it's one of the reasons why I generally, even though I have, like, a good portion of my audience is libertarian, but it's like, I just can't stand the people that actually gravitate towards power, because when pushed, they default to just leftist shit.
Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to catch up on the last couple of
there's
chats there, and then we can sort of get more into the psychology of it.
Yes, we can do. Guys, Nadia Caesar donated $5 and said, "Reject Christianity, return to Caesar."
No,
you would say that.
Yes.
You would say that, Mr. Caesar.
Based in Juvenalian.
Paul donated £2 and said, "Louis, please tell Razor to stop being a boomer." I'm not sure who Razor is.
Razor Fist.
Razor Fist.
I'm not
right.
sure about what.
I don't know. He said stop. Tell Razor to stop being a boomer.
Wait, is he the one that's the objectivist?
Yeah.
Razor Fist? Yeah, he's the one that blocked me. Remember the guy that went on the whole big screed about Rothbard being like he's a moral subjectivist,
Yeah.
and all this kind of nonsense.
The thing, I don't know, like, that's the same reason Razor Fist blocked me as well, because he, like, you've read all this. Would you say that, like, these are actually what I would consider the words of someone who is actually more of a moral absolutist than anything? Like, these are not like moral. It's not like moral wheedling. It's not like saying that everybody's position is right. He's saying this is what you do, and you do it to the extreme.
He doesn't even bother to make like a utilitarian case. It is just assumed that that these are the correct positions to take, which is such a powerful point that people don't consider. I mean, it's the joke sort of quote from Tony Blair. If you start explaining yourself, you're already losing. If you can't just assert your position and people agree with you, you are on the back foot.
Yeah, I don't understand what would be the. I don't know that Razor is an objectivist. I don't know, but I would say that as it relates to this article, I don't find anything wrong with it. I don't think that even if I were a libertarian, that I would just, turn up my nose. If you were an anarcho-capitalist, I could see you looking at this and sort of denouncing it because it includes anything related to a nation state. But The whole idea with libertarians, unfortunately, is their own self-possession, possession of their own like utopian philosophy that they're not willing to compromise at all on their beliefs, and that's their biggest fault.
Well, that's
because they could achieve a lot if they would just, in fact, compromise on a quarter of it.
Well, that's exactly. I don't know if you want to start getting into the other article or not yet, but what you're discussing is essentially how the NAP or the non-aggression principle hamstrings what is an incredibly powerful framework.
Yeah.
I mean, we can sort of maybe go through some of the portions of it here. I mean, I think I used the phrase at one point describing libertarianism as a unique ideology, and the fact that it seems to go to extreme lengths to go and not justify violence.
Yeah.
It is unique in this sort of aspect, that there is no other really forms of ideology that ever go to the lengths of suggesting that you should just be murdered by your enemies because it's good.
Yeah, I think, again, and a lot of people have been very angry at me with saying this, but you can't just default to the position of if you kill your enemies, they win, which is a lot of what libertarians, liberals, small c conservatives, people who consider themselves centrists, if you're not willing to say that, the people who are imposing all of this horror on you in the modern world, if you're not willing to say that these people are evil and then violence needs to be done to them, then you are not a useful actor. And that is the bare minimum of where you need to be.
Well, no, I think there's a section of that article here that summarizes this. Libertarianism sees itself as existing outside the political struggle. It suggests that to dominate at all is somehow wrong, and it is inherently illegitimate, no matter the justification. Now, I still see a value in a system of ethics existing outside of the concept of both the state and politics. It would be insane to suggest that such a system could somehow solve the state and political conflicts, and ever intensifying conflicts at that. Doubly so when it cannot manifest a motivating friend-enemy distinction, which is the core aspect, as Schmidt describes it, of politics.
Yeah.
The fact that you can boil down two different enmities or identities or, religions, classes, political parties, economic situations. If you can suggest that one group of these people is the friend and another group is the enemy, then you have already set forth the sort of psychological patterning for people to recognize that the enemy group does not deserve the same rights and the same privileges that us in the friend group do. And that, from this conflict emerges. And that if this is being done to you, you must understand this and do it to them too.
Yeah, it's the idea of the asymmetrical warfare, and that if you're not willing to retaliate against an enemy who wants to destroy you, then you are going to be destroyed. It seems obvious, but a lot of people aren't willing to hold that thought in their heads.
Yeah, because I think I then go and use the example of the letter that started the Red Terror during the Bolshevik Revolution as, just an almost painfully obvious example of a political actor doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, it says someone that Schmidt actually reveres for the way that they've done it.
Tell you what, this is actually a quote by Lenin. This is the letter that started the Red Terror. He says, "Comrades, the Kulak uprising in your 5 districts must be crushed without pity. You must make examples of these people. 1. Hang, publicly, so that people see it. At least 100 kulaks, rich bastards, and known bloodsuckers. 2. Publish their names. 3. Seize all their grain. 4. Single out the hostages per instructions in yesterday's telegram. Do all this so that for miles around people see it all, understand it, tremble, and tell themselves that we are killing the bloodthirsty kulaks and that we will continue to do so. Yours, Lenin. P.S. Find tougher people."
Based.
It's the hilarity is that this comes full circle.
Yeah.
Because Rothbard's style of rhetoric and that right-wing populist plan is taken literally from this. I mean, it's in some of other Rothbard stuff where he just talks, openly about Lenin understood that as long as you don't compromise on your principles, you can get away with any tactics politics and any alliances you want.
Like if you replace kulaks with pedophiles in this, like they're like if Lenin was an absolutist on the pedophile question instead of being a communist,
he calls them known bloodsuckers.
Yeah.
I mean, why can't we basically reframe this and get the Q people to do something for us?
Get the conspiraboomers to actually do something.
Yeah. I mean, it is worth also noting that the killing off of the kulaks destroyed Russia for years. They couldn't make food.
He was doing this in like service of a terrible goal, yes, but this is the political will that these people had.
It is. I know.
To Louis' point about the L or the W, Lenin took one of the biggest W's going, despite the fact that he still got murked.
Yeah.
Because, where is the Tsar now?
Yeah, I know, but look what it did to Russia. Russia was destroyed by this.
Do you think he cared?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, this was supposed to be the idea, it was supposed to be for the benefit of the country. But
it's just such an autistic argument.
It is.
I know.
The point is not what he did and why he did it. The point is that he did it.
Yes.
And the point is that despite the horrendous holes in communist ideology that everyone here is aware of, that they went on to control that country up until the 1990s.
It motivated and animated a subset of the population into a violent revolution against people who may have not had grievances against.
Yeah, it's the point that Lenin is an example of the political will it takes to win. And that is.
Well, it's a very good understanding of basically the usefulness of fear.
Yeah.
That how useful that is in terms of containing a population and basically spreading your own actual influence in the area. This is actually a very concise way of putting this that explains that it does work. It flat out does work.
Oh yeah, it does work, but it's very difficult to control the outcome.
Yes and no.
Yeah, there's always unless you do it completely, there's always a backlash for a start.
Not necessarily. I mean, there's a result of starving yourself because you did this, but I mean, in terms of a backlash, it's like I don't know. I mean, the left is doing that generally right now with the federal state in the United States, and there's fuck all for a backlash.
Well, exactly. It's a pattern of success. I mean, the next example I go on to in the article is I suggest, we should heed the words of Hillary Clinton in 2018 when she quite plainly and masterfully stated on international news that the GOP, Trump supporters, and any identifiable deplorables should not be allowed to carry on their lives in peace, and that they should be publicly harassed so that others should know. Lenin would be salivating at the thought. Not only has she de facto declared herself as the leader of the anti-right faction, she has designated the enemy and what should be done unto them. Clinton even picked up on the idea that the most effective political harassment should be done for all to see, and that this order wasn't just given to troops of a specific organisation, it was stated in the press for all eyes.
I mean, there's you want to say about the whole thing that politically at the time it was seen as a misstep for Clinton to do that. But as was borne out in all the rhetoric of the insurrection, it planted the seeds in the minds of the left that this is what you do, that you essentially, almost literally demonize your enemy. You turn them into these baying, bloodthirsty beasts, and that you use that as the narrative so that any action you take against them is...
it's gotten to the point now where the right generally... Anyone who's not basically a Ben Shapiro acolyte is a terrorist. And that the federal government is being directed to oppress people that are just nominally on the right, but are not Ben Shapiro acolytes.
Yeah.
That's happening now.
Is this very... without this continuing style of rhetoric, the bait and switch they pulled with the 2020 election, and the fact that the raiding of the Capitol building and the insurrection was an attack on democracy, that bait and switch wouldn't be possible if they hadn't painted themselves as the good Democrats first.
Yeah, there's also a lot of the rhetoric that came out after the 2020 election was that a lot of the more mask-off people said, we don't care if it was fraud because we did it for the health of the nation. We had to commit election fraud to protect democracy. Was basically the thrust of was it like a Time article?
Yes, the
how the election was fortified.
Fortified, that's it.
They openly, like O.J. Simpson style, put out a "How We Did It" document, and nothing happened because they have demonstrated their willingness to use violence, and they've done it. Again, we're getting onto the topic of the stream, but that really is the most powerful political act. It's the people I think misunderstand how Antifa works. They think they're this bottom-up organization, and they're not.
No,
they're funded by NGOs, and they are the plausible deniability of the state actors. In that they will astroturf these people to go to your house and basically intimidate you.
They are the foot soldiers of like the neoliberal internationalist conspiracy, basically. Like that is who they serve.
In the end, that's who they serve.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah. It's so that Antifa and Extinction Rebellion can stand up and look like utter lunatics, because that is their job.
Yeah.
Their job is to stand out of the Overton window on the left-wing side and set the radical position.
Yeah.
So that someone like Boris Johnson or Joe Biden can come and nestle themselves a point or two down from where they are and be like, oh look, I'm the reasonable compromise.
Yeah, they are the compromise. They are what causes people to compromise. And it's through the implicit threat of violence.
Yes.
There's, as I've told people before, the way that the left is able to extract all of these concessions continuously from the people on the right is the idea that if they don't give them to them, there will be a violent Marxist revolution that will completely destroy the nation.
That's what Black Lives Matter was. That's what it was in its entirety.
And like I said, a lot of people don't understand this, though. They'll talk about, what they'll do is they'll talk about Antifa, or they'll talk about Black Lives Matter. They will essentially amplify this idea that they are these radicals, that they are these people who are, an existential threat to the country, because they're not really. Antifa and Black Lives Matter are never going to be allowed to carry out a revolution. The elites would never allow that to happen.
Because they stand for the status quo.
So even people like Andy No on Twitter talking about like Antifa revolution stuff is effectively amplifying leftist propaganda in many ways.
Yeah, these are people who haven't been educated on the term counter-revolutionaries.
Yeah,
because they are set up against us.
Yes,
it is the duty of a lot of people on the right at the moment to consciously understand themselves as revolutionaries. I mean, what aspect of the current neoliberal order in the UK or the US could you actually stand by and say, I think this is good? And not a shred of it, as far as I'm concerned.
No, I'm actually thinking and being like, there's really institutionally here in the UK. I don't know about you in the US, though, but like in terms of public institutions, I don't think there's any of them I can point to and say these people are actually doing a good job.
No, I mean, I would have to go down a very, very long list to see, but it's not really, I mean, especially on a federal level, that's when it gets even worse. But there are not really very many good institutions. There's good people within them, I know that for a fact, but the problem is that these people are ultimately powerless to really do anything for the better because they're not calling the shots. It's people that are appointed to positions that call all the shots and make all the decisions. Whether they're right or wrong or good or bad or going to be more effective or not, it's not their determination. And unfortunately, it's just like certain organizations that become so corrupted over time or are so possessed with the idea of continuing careers, continuing the scam, that Like it's the main reason why the CIA, the DoD, all these agencies and organizations are based institutions, really, with the DoD. They're promoting the idea of like woke bullshit in their institution. It's to keep the money train flowing, and it's for no other reason. That's it. It's a single reason they're doing it.
It's like, why wouldn't they do it?
Well, they have to. They have to be part of the cultural hegemony. You know, in the same way that the Constitution was only useful if it was a given. Progressivism is only useful as a political force if it's a given. And it is. At the current moment, things like democracy, civil rights are all givens. Society cannot exist without civil rights and the welfare state as far as the majority of people are concerned. There is no way to organise society that isn't liberal democracy in their eyes.
Yes. I would say that a lot of people are blinded by the very... Like, I've had conversations over the course of my lifetime. I've had many conversations with people about the entire... Like, because one of the things that basically changed my way of thinking was reading the Apology. You know, like, understanding, like, basically, here you have a group of people in a society, you know, in a city, Athens, who hate this guy because he's questioning them, so they fucking kill him. They just bump him off. They vote to kill him. And it completely changed my way of thinking about the entire concept of democracy. And I would say that I am in a very, very small percentage that is even capable of questioning, in terms of American society, questioning the very concept of democracy and it not just being, by default, morally good.
Yeah, it is the ultimate... sorry, go on, Trey.
It is the ultimate heresy at this point. Being capable of questioning democracy. Democracy has been the political zeitgeist of the last 100 years.
And people can't understand, or they will just reject. Like I've seen a lot of boomers do this on the right that say, "Well, what if democracy? You know, what if 51% of people voted for a genocide? You know, can you conceive of democracy being bad based on that?" And the response is, "Well, people would never do that." And unfortunately, it's just like people don't understand that, like, democracy is just a tool. It's just they don't understand it. They imbibe it with this like moral consciousness of it in its own right.
Yeah,
it's beyond questioning, and it's like, no, it's like anything else. It's like if you look at monarchies and that, it's like all of them were just autocracies in large part. But is that like in itself like is that itself in and of itself evil always, no matter what? Because it's not democracy. People just can't understand the basic concept of this, and it's a big fucking number of people that are in that group.
Well, you're exactly right, though. It's been a pattern throughout history. I mean, I was reading something on the sort of implementation of Greek democracy myself the other day, and there's a sort of point where, offhandedly, as if it's almost sort of just assumed knowledge, the writer goes on to state, it seems obvious that democracy was not a rationally discovered concept, but was instead a cultural production of centralizing power. It is a purely Machiavellian tactic. You appeal to the pros and you sell them some stupid myth.
It literally created rhetoricians. Like, democracy created rhetoric.
Essentially.
Yep, and it's a beast that just constantly votes to give itself more power, and no one can do anything about it. It cannot do anything but grow in every single aspect of itself and every institution. They are set up, every single one is set up to, if you want the same or greater budget next year, spend everything. And everybody needs a greater budget next year, which means even just on the institutional level, big government just has to keep growing. And it's getting your hands further and further into everyone's pockets until you're just a slave to the system.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Usually in chat standing some democracy, and we basically need to get him in here and deprogram him at some point.
Yeah,
getting Ursula in here would be great fun.
Like that's
not going to be hard.
I'm not attacking the entire basis of like a Republican sense of representation or voting. I'm not against those ideas. Well, I am saying specifically that the democracy is in itself a tool. It's like money. It doesn't have any inherent moral good to it. Because so long as people are voting for evil things that we could define and describe and explain as evil, if people are voting for evil things, it doesn't therefore make them, that thing, good, or those people good, or the process good. It's just a process. It's just a system. It's just a mechanism. Like, there's nothing about it that makes it holy or sacrosanct. There's nothing.
It's a double whammy as well, though. It appeals to the lowest rung of society, especially, let's say, for example, we keep the conversation strictly to universal suffrage. It convinces the lowest rungs of society that they have some ability to influence things, and that through exercising their vote, they can change the world. So if you ever attempted to suggest to them, not only that are they being tricked through this process, that just inherently that it's never going to work like that. The points we've grabbed from Cuneilt Leiden through the democratization series.
Yeah.
That given the fact that knowledge is not equal across society, the people who are voting for other individuals are more than likely voting for people who know a lot more than they do. So it's the idea that this is ever going to work as some sort of fair, reciprocal system that you could challenge in a way that won't see you just being called an anti-democrat or an authoritarian it's absurd.
So we've got a few more donations here. We got people saying to bring Uslium, but we'll probably have a whole stream with him on his own at some point. We don't really have time to have that whole discussion. We
could be already here until midnight.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would just direct him to our democratization series, because it does take 30 hours to talk through a lot of the stuff in detail to give people work examples and how it has worked in history. It's basically a deprogramming course.
It doesn't matter anyway, because democratists touch small boys.
Yeah, that's the point. That's the real the Chad point, in that the end point of democracy has been a class of elite people who are systematically infiltrated with people who are pedophiles or pedophile enablers
or Satanists,
or
bloodsuckers or whatever you want to call them.
That is not hyperbole. We know this for a fact, that the elite class are deviants of the highest degree,
and always have been, going back to Keynes and going back way further than that. I mean, Christ, going back to Nero.
It's just boredom of excess. That's what it is.
Exactly. There's definitely a degree of that, but it's worth noting that they do congregate together and they are dangerous to society.
Yeah.
Maybe they shouldn't be, rewarded with the rulership of the state for their despicable acts. Oh, so much fucking pedo shit going off. It's untrue.
Oh dear! Now there's a quick quote here. I don't know
if you want to go on to the Schmidt one at the bottom yet.
Yeah, we should do the Schmidt one at the bottom, because that really is the meat of the whole violence and politics stuff. Then we can get on a little bit to the kind of individual level stuff as well, the self-defense stuff, because a lot of it plays into this.
Yeah, I believe this is a statement from a closing point of one of the chapters.
Yeah, I think I gave you a slide trick with it on white and a black background, so people can read it a bit easier at home.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
Just because it's a little bit hard on the eyes sometimes, having it like that. There we go.
Yeah. Nothing can escape this consequence of the political. If the pacifist opposition to war were so strong that it could drive the pacifists to war against the non-pacifists into a war against war, this would prove that it really had political strength, because it would be strong enough to group men according to friend and enemy. If the will to prevent war is so strong that it no longer shuns war itself, it has become a political motive, i.e., it affirms, if only as an extreme eventuality, war and even the reason of war at present. At present, this seems to be a particularly promising way of justifying wars. The war then takes place in the form of the absolute last war of mankind. Such wars are necessarily especially intense, and inhuman wars Going beyond the political, they must at the same time degrade the enemy in moral and other categories to make him an inhuman monster, which must not only be repelled by, but definitively destroyed, i.e., he is no longer merely an enemy to be pushed back within his borders, but the possibility of such wars shows especially clearly that war still exists today as a real possibility, and that is alone on the friend-enemy distinction and the real politicized... Oh, sorry. Ugh. I've just completely fucked up that last line. And it is on that alone that the friend-enemy distinction and the realization of the political depend.
Like it's a bit of a long one there, but basically what he's saying is that unless you are willing to do violence in service of an idea, you don't have a political cause. Because unless there is at least that implicit threat of the next step, should the political process break down, you're not doing politics.
No.
And that's kind of all politics is predicated on the implicit threat of force in any way, especially in a democracy.
It's a sort of snippet that's tied in great with closing off some of the things we've discussed around World War I and World War II. That sort of globally there was this narrative that it was the war against war, and it was the absolute last war of mankind, which is the reason why they could bomb Dresden and burn it to the ground, and that was a justified act, and that they could bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that these were justified acts to do these things.
They did say that about the First World War as well, though.
Oh yeah, the First World War was framed as the war to end all wars. That's the whole point, but...
Yeah.
Not everyone understands the scale of death that happened at the Somme.
No. Sadly not. I mean, oh my god. But that's more tactics being terrible than that, and the value of life being worth 0, apparently, according to the generals. But
well, I would say basically the response to the basis of the Second World War, that ending, sort of the creation of, especially like fast forward to 1991, where American hegemony is left standing by itself. America is the hegemon of the world, and it's still continuing to perpetuate itself off the fumes of World War II and the war to end all wars. The question is that if American hegemony falters, and basically multipolarity is allowed to return, what is going to be the direct consequence of that? And in my opinion, if, let's say, like the accelerationists and that sort of get their end and sort of American hegemony falls, there's the argument that I have in terms of like international relations that China is basically going to step up and become the new hegemon. But I do think that you are going to see an outbreak of wars all across this world. I think that's going to happen. Because a lot of this fucking world, a lot of these nations are just lines on a map. There's no real basis for them. And I think that I think there's going to be a lot that kicks off should American hegemony basically falter. And I'm not really saying that in a positive or negative fashion, but I am saying I expect that to occur.
Thing is, it's part of the issue is that things like democracy and the modern state and progressivism have led to a point whereby we don't interpret the world in a sense of, well, that exists far away from me, so I don't need to care about it. That's almost an evil opinion nowadays. If you don't care about either Israel or Palestine, you are inherently a bad person, because not only have you not chosen a side, but you've also not chosen the side that you should take. It's like one of these kind of double whammies. You've entirely stepped outside the framework of the issue, and because of that, you're evil.
It's funny, too, because a lot of the people that actually have, like, a hard stance about Israel or Palestine, like, they're so apathetic about so much else.
You shouldn't have a hard... You shouldn't really have a hard stance in Israel or Palestine. You should have a very hard stance of what happens in your home and your street.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have a hard stance about what happens on their street or in their town or in their school, or in their children's schools. They've essentially, they've taken their eye off the ball, and a lot of the stuff Hopper talks about when it comes to violence is the fact that people have given up their own right to do it. and that humans need to use violence in their lives to achieve conflict resolution, and that removing violence from people's lives in a utopian sense is a horrendous thing to do.
He would frame it more in terms of the sort of property dynamic, which obviously is underwritten by violence, but it allows him to state it in a sort of nicer fashion. It's more, in the purest form, it's kind of explained best by Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah.
His whole notion of the power process, that you must overcome challenges in your local environment, and that the most obvious challenge is providing security for yourself. You know, it is the mindset of someone who believes that the police actually is coming to save them.
Yeah.
People, the Q thing, the most embarrassing point about it is not that it's lies based on Pizzagate that may or may not be true. It's that they think the solution to Pizzagate is sicking the FBI and police forces on paedophiles and not doing it themselves.
Yeah, the trust the plan, wait for Q. And that's what makes them look like such controlled opposition, in that their solution to the problem isn't these politicians are actual blood-sucking pedophiles and we need to go out and remove them. Their answer is trust the plan, guys. The FBI has already arrested them and they're already in a ghost jail.
Trust the FBI, ladies and gentlemen. I'm telling you here right now. Trust the FBI. Trust the federal government and federal employees. You should trust them. Hey, by the way, anyone want to buy any illegal firearms?
How short did you cut your shotgun down to?
Yeah. Let me start getting the shotgun calipers out.
Yeah, does anyone here want to buy some grenades?
It's funny you should say that. Some of this thing, one thing that occurs to me is that whilst we're moaning about governments, there's also the corporations. What happens when Kellogg, under the current circumstances, of shortages, decides that it needs all of the grain material and leaves, Unilever at war with them, essentially? Because these sorts of organisations are massive and wield way more power than a lot of governments.
Mass collective violence is always the answer.
Mass collective violence, corporate violence is.
That's again where I know you've talked about this, Louis, as well, but that's where a lot of the libertarians fail with the private corporation argument.
It's a private company, bro.
I mean, it's not. It's not like a private corporation hasn't at one point or another owned one of the largest fleets of navies in the world. Admittedly, it was a deal with Pepsi for Russian warships, but
the corporations, I have mixed feelings about the corporations, because they seemingly like the whole idea of sort of the underwriting of cyberpunk, let's say, of corporate warfare. I don't ever see that actually happening, because it seems like so many of these corporations act as a cartel in all these different industries. Well, they act as a cartel.
You don't see Heckler and Koch and Kalashnikov basically funding two sides of the same war, and almost starting it just because this makes the sales good.
Well, let's posit a question first. What actually is a corporation? It is a legal entity, and it is a legal entity that exists in the eyes of the state. It is almost in a sense to say that mass international corporations are sort of an affectation of the modern state. They're almost a perfect product of the sort of Woodrow Wilson, FDR era of giving gas and chemical companies absurd amounts of money to start the war effort in Germany, and that these companies then become enshrined as the world's biggest producers of X, Y, or Z chemical. They would not exist if it wasn't for government money and government regulators that suggest the corporation can even exist in the first place.
Yeah,
there is no corporations without the state. Not in the sense of saying, in a sort of gay Friedman-esque sense that there is no capitalism without the state. There is always capitalism. There is always exchange.
Yeah.
But international capitalism, complex, exchanges that involve fiat currency,
I think it's easy to distinguish the two is that you don't need to, it doesn't require some federal massive state for there to be a sole proprietor, but there does for there to be a multinational corporation. It must exist in that case.
That's exactly the point, though. The sole proprietor is the guarantor of his own service.
Yeah.
The corporation has no guarantor other than the state. That's why they are allowed the privilege of limited liability.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's again the point of the people have, through like large government action, had their own personal autonomy and their own personal will taken away from them. Either by the corporations or the state. I know it's some people consider it a bit of a lulbert talking point to say that the corporations are a wing of the government, but they are. Any large enough corporation that has been allowed to have its own fiefdom within an area of monopoly has to be enabled by a government.
It's reciprocal.
Yeah, but sometimes it's the other way around. Yeah, there's a lot of governments that are supported by corporations.
Yes, but the problem is at this point is that under the framework of a nationalist government, should these corporations exist and actually benefit that nationalist government, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. But the problem is that because of the trajectory of this 20th century, we now have the multinational governments, the international governments, and the international corporations. And that's the unfortunate side of this, is that it's not even necessarily the corporations, it's the fucking governments. And the fact that this cartel or this cabal of people, the internationalists, that if you want to, people can, and I'm sure I could complain about, a variety of corporations, but the reason why they're there is because of these people, the intelligentsia.
Mm.
Yeah, the distinction,
the technocrats.
Anyone who preaches either the one international corporation or the one world government is essentially preaching the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that no matter what these people call themselves, anyone who believes in the international brotherhood of humanity under a single auspice is evil and to be treated as your enemy.
It's not even into the realms of is it corporation, is it government? It's the notion that I'm someone who thinks even the size of nation states is too big a society for the average person to actually fully understand.
Yeah.
The normal people cannot, I don't think anyone actually cannot fully take in how to construct 20, 30 million people in an organized fashion. Of course it's going to be chaos. We just pretend that it isn't. And we're gaslit into thinking that there is something outside of ourselves, other than God, that purports on as some form of order that we must obey by.
Hey, Trig, you should get the meme I made on the screen though, because I've just realized not used it. That's I don't know. It's definitely the mood.
Yes.
Yes.
But while she fetched that, we've got a couple more super chats here that I'm not going over. James Murray donated $5 and said, "You talk a lot about Christianity, which I do agree it's necessary in a strong, pure, in Western country. But when did any of you go to church, read your Bible, or pray?"
I used to go to Catholic school, so I don't know what to tell you.
I'm going to say I grew up in the church. I was an active member of the church, like into my 20s, to be fair. And I've done a lot of reading on theology. I will start doing it now, but I'd have to brush up. But I can quote like chapter and verse of the Bible sometimes.
I know bits and pieces, despite the fact that it would seem like the exact opposite thing.
No, I have read and studied theology, biblical text, and surrounding literature very heavily throughout most of my early life into adulthood. So I would say that I might not be an active member of church right now, but that's because the church is so fucking paused that I actually think those people are scum. And
I mean, if the issue with religion or in particular with Christianity is if it wants to win me back, it's got to do it. Step up. You want to win me back to the church and all that? Step up. You come out with the Pope saying all this freaking queer shit, and I'm not going back. Fuck off. You want to win me back? Win me back. It's up to you.
My answer to why I don't go to church is that it's not Christian enough.
Yeah, there you go.
Honestly, quite simply.
It's just funny because there's a lot of good priests and preachers on the ground that are stifled by the powers that be. But the issue isn't necessarily that we're here to justify the religion itself, but it is to say that if you take it out of people, it has a direct consequence. I don't even think it's debatable at this point that there's a direct consequence of someone becoming an atheist, that it has an effect on them.
Well,
and that it goes down multiple roads, and it's very clear that one of those roads is just becoming like a nihilistic degenerate, and that is awful.
Yeah, that's the really downside.
You become an atheist. You either remain one for your life, or you teach yourself out of it.
I know Trig struggles with this.
Yeah,
because you've always been kind of anti a lot of organized religion, but
very much so. But I'm quite spiritual. I've read up on a lot of religions. I just couldn't get over the concept of a god in per se. I like a lot of the morality teachings of some religions. Even some of the bits in Islam are interesting and worthy of note as building moral frameworks. I think religions are essential, and I don't think the general public. This is what I was talking to AA about before, and I'm in a total agreement with what he said. The general public is not capable of dealing without that moral framework that an organized religion usually gives. Was Marx right with it being an opiate of the masses? Sort of. But it's handy to have as there for people to not go, as you said, totally hedonistic, nihilistic, and all of a sudden you've got the collapse of Rome.
For example, you're not someone who believes in like a purely material universe, though. Like you do believe in higher things than yourself and higher things than perceived reality.
I believe.
We talked about this.
I believe in higher goals. I don't know if I know there's a lot that I don't know. And I'm very happy to entertain almost any idea without having to believe in it. I can sort of go, okay, let's play with this idea. With regards a maker, I don't know.
The thing is, what I try and do is with people who call themselves atheists is that to be strictly an atheist, you have to believe that there is no such thing as spirituality.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that there is no such thing as spirituality, but it is that it's wrong or erroneous.
Yes. What they're suggesting is there is nothing good can come from the existential, which is why they lead to nihilism.
Yeah. But I'm going to quickly read Coney Current Year's super chat because apparently he's a sleepy boy and he's about to go to bed. What is the fundamental thing that makes objectivism wrong versus Rothbard's philosophy? Also, what is the response to the idiotic Lolbert take on IP? I don't know what take you mean on IP, because a lot of people would do that on both sides. So.
I'm going to presume, because I've seen him discussing it before, that his position is that IP should be a thing.
I don't know. I think it's a weird thing it's something that can be sorted out after the pedophiles have been murdered.
Yeah, no, exactly.
IP as an intellectual property. Oh god.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're answering the question of whether or not there should be IP, you're wasting your time with things that aren't as important as other things.
Yeah, that's something to be decided when more things have been won.
Also, Rand was just a horrific, insufferable Jewish woman who thought that the world was entirely material and that Western Christian culture to her actually shouldn't have been celebrated, which is one of the reasons why I cannot stand by any of it.
Yeah, I mean, Ayn Rand, like, I have to say that I honestly do fall on the spectrum far more of if the divide is spiritualist and materialist, I'm far more on the spectrum of being a materialist. But with Ayn Rand, I just find her kind of like, I'm bemused by her. Like, I don't really take, like, Randianism or what have you very seriously at all. No. And I really don't think how you really could. You kind of have to be kind of a low IQ individual too.
That's what it is.
But I'm not opposed to it. Like, I'm not really like that opposed to it because I just don't take it very seriously.
it doesn't say anything is the problem. Randianism is not a whole philosophy. It doesn't have metaphysics. It doesn't have any higher sense of itself because it's made. It's like if someone in 50 years' time decided to make a political philosophy about the Harry Potter books.
Yeah. Honestly, yes. Honestly, it's why it's in fiction. Like, it presents itself as fiction.
Well, that's the thing. I made a meme of that. It was like, the muscle meme from Predator. It's like Randians, Harry Potter fans getting their entire worldview from a work of fiction.
Honestly.
That's just how it feels to me. It really is, I'm going to read The Fountainhead for the 15th
because,
time.
who are the stalwarts of objectivism today? Yawon Book gets up on whatever the Rand Institute website and talks about how COVID passports are great and you should give more money to Israel for missiles.
Yeah, the problem is that Rand...
Where are the non-Jewish objectivists? I'm just asking. I'm curious as all.
She's just noticing, okay. Quick one from Doominator in chat there. He said, how does the gang feel about white women using magic rocks as spiritual replacement for Christianity?
Good, because it stonks.
I'm very mad about it because I, as a young autistic person, like minerals. They're minerals, Marie. And it has thrown the price of nice agates and things through the roof.
I need to someone has just gone and stated that Rand is more valid than Marx. That is actually untrue. I will not argue, but it's just untrue.
I think honestly, Marx is more complete than Rand in many ways. I don't know how you judge valid, but I
honestly agree with that. Now that I think of it, I do agree with that. But I honestly find Randianism, what have you, to be, or objectivism, I suppose, far more innocuous than Marxism.
Yeah. It is innocuous, but I also think it's I don't know. I think people who get stuck in that objectivist rut don't quite grasp certain things, and
I agree with that.
It's kind of sad to see people like that. You're right. It's a very low IQ take. I like your view that it's just isn't that cute? They read The Fountainhead.
I could be wrong. I'm not saying I couldn't be wrong, but it is my view of it.
Having studied it quite extensively, you are correct. That is the correct takeaway. You have read the situation entirely right.
You have read.
Well, someone mentioned white women earlier, and all I got to say is that from my direct exposure to young white women, I'm calling for a total and complete shutdown of white women until we can figure out what the hell is going on. And I am not joking. I am not joking.
Actually,
we need to shut down on a white one and go through the code line by line and figure out what's
I don't know what is going on with white women in modern society today, but man, they are out of control. And all I gotta say, if I could we'll start with this. I know this isn't really off topic, honestly. This is on topic. Women need to be prohibited by law from having nose rings. Anything in their nose. Prohibited.
Yes.
And I am not fucking joking.
Tongue bars.
Oh, I don't know.
There.
Yeah.
Are we going over the rules for the Covenant community now?
Yeah, we are. We're drafting up the rules. We have called ourselves El Duce.
Yeah.
Yes. Fine. I'll do it. And we're starting at square one.
Where
are
the Romans now? You're fucking looking at.
Oh man.
Speaking of which, I'm going to go over some of these donations. Some of these happened 40 minutes ago. Gaius Not Your Caesar again says Caesar didn't take Rome because he peacefully marched. He took it through power and force. I mean, yeah. All the great moves of history used violence.
Yeah.
All of them. And people will talk about Gandhi and I'll just laugh at them.
I know, that was crazy.
Gandhi was an agorist. Shut up, faggot.
People will talk about what's his name? My brain's gone. South Africa.
Oh, Nelson Mandela.
Nelson Mandela.
He put it through grenades through cafe windows.
Yeah, Nelson Mandela's wife talking about necklacing people. Talking about executing people with burning tires full of petrol because they looked at a white woman.
I honestly, it's one of the serious things that needs to die is the mythos around him and around fucking Martin Luther King, because these are just big fucking lies that of people that don't deserve the recognition and that had a demonstrably bad effect as a direct result. That things got worse because of the mythos around these people.
Yeah, the Ollis £25 is calling you a bluff. Usually win. We will do at some point. We've got another democratization episode next week, but we will get him in at some point. 1MD Survivalist donated $2. He says there's two paths to the United States. One is collapse of the West, and the survivors rebuilding. From maybe parts of Alaska. He's going very full out there. Two Americas transcended an empire. This is going to take two super chat isms. I don't know. I didn't quite. Some of that was a bit incoherent, but I think is what he's saying is that basically either America collapses or it transcends in some kind of like galactic empire. We basically
no, that's not happening.
It's not already.
No.
Eventually, I've talked about this recently in a stream. I think it was last week, but I honestly think that with the United States, I don't think that if I were to say initially or currently where my opinion is on the matter, eventually the United States is not going to collapse. It is simply just going to run out of money. All the wealth is going to be extracted. We're just going to be exhausted. It's going to be like an empty mine, and it's just going to be abandoned.
No, that's to the point where America's sold wholesale to Israel for a penny.
Oh, don't say that. That could actually happen.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think Israel right now is desperately clinging to the fact that it's going to try to extract as much wealth as possible before it runs out. And then it's gonna be like when Trump left office. It's gonna be like, okay, yeah, bye. We're with China now. Like something. They're gonna just default to somebody else because it was so unbelievably fast from where Netanyahu was praising Trump and praising America to boom, welcome President Joe Biden. Oh, I love this guy. And it's just like if eventually America goes, it's not that. Like the nationalists, the nativists have taken over and say, hey, you are a bunch of foreigners, fuck you. It's going to be like, guys, we're literally out of money. There's nothing left to take. And they're going to be like, okay, bye. And they're going to go to someone else.
Yeah, I'm more like the scenario.
Hello, Britain.
I'm more like the scenario is that you end up with a Soviet Union style death of the previous legal fiction and a creation of technically a different country that doesn't have all the debt. That is the possible, unless there's actually some kind of violent revolution, that is the end point of all of this.
The issue is going to be whether the powers that be that exist now still cling to the power that exists, and I don't mean the functionary retards that work for these people, but I mean the actual powers that be in the society. Cling to the nation itself, or whether, in my view, I think this is far more likely, they just move the fuck out. They're like, all right, we got the money, we're out, we're gone.
That's what happened on a smaller scale before. You had communities that were full of the WASPs, and then Jews moved in, and then blacks moved in, and because of the value of the property at the time, the Jews moved out, and the WASPs had to stay.
It's like a microcosm, but people get left holding the bag in those cases, and that's like an example of a neighborhood that has been white flighted. It's like the end point for America.
Should we go through the last couple?
Yeah, the last couple, and then
close off.
We'll do a little bit of an end. Yeah, a little bit of a conclusion point. But yeah, the depressing future of current post America is imagine an infinite Baltimore ghetto. Imagine a Baltimore ghetto the size of the country.
I wouldn't
Mega
say
City 1.
I would say that is not likely, just because of the fact that I think things can only go so far. And during the BLM riots of 2020, that the direct consequence was that they reached the suburbs, and even in some cases before then. And basically, you had the Gen Xers, the millennials, show up with baseball bats and rifles. And I was shit scared, dude, when that was going on. I was like, oh my god, it's going to go to... This is a fucking race war. We're about to enter a race war.
Race war.
And unironically so... Unironically so, it was insane what was going on. That basically the blacks were going into the quote-unquote white neighborhood, and the whites basically grouped up. They like cavemanned up, and they're walking down the streets with fucking baseball bats. And I was like, "Oh shit!" Dude, what happens? What happens when a black guy shows up to the white guys rolling down the street with aluminum bats and shoots one of them? What happens?
I will close off this section before I read the next super chat. Maniacal Foreigner has the best quote. He just said, "Imagine a Yeezy stamping on a human face forever."
Or a Tim.
A Tim. You got the Tim.
Jogging on a human face forever.
Nah.
Mr. Twisted's friend donated $5. He said, in your opinion, do you think that Heinlein's view has any merit, or is it just a pipe dream? Again, people who base their worldview around Heinlein are like people who base their worldview around Rand, in that I don't think they have
it's a slightly less cringe version of it.
Here's the question, is which Heinlein? Because Heinlein, every single one of his books, it's different. He plays with libertarian ideals, but he's never coherent in any way, shape, or form. So past that question doesn't really. I don't know. I don't know what his views were. So
I'm going to call it a cut-off for the super chats. I'll read the last two.
We've had a few. We've had a few by Streamlabs as well.
We have, but we're going to have to finish the stream relatively soon. So they are coming in as we're reading them. We've reached the infinite YouTuber loop.
You're supposed to give your money at the start of the stream, not 2 hours in.
Stop giving us money, guys. We can't cope with it.
Don't dissuade them.
No,
I need my Twix pass.
We're gonna maybe outro a little bit now, and kind of like a final point is that in terms of the role of violence in society, how do you think we go about making people who are on board with certain things more comfortable with the idea of essentially the necessity at some point of political violence? How do you instill that in people?
Do you want the simple answer?
Yeah.
What you do is you tell them that you either stand by us or you are against us. You do what the left does. You do what Clinton does. You do what Lenin did. You go out and you make public threats about people who don't stand by you must therefore stand against you, and that they aren't therefore fighting for the good, greater cause.
Sorry, but I disagree with that on a condition.
What's that?
That you have to be literally at the level of Hillary Clinton to do that effectively.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. Not on a national level. You could do it locally.
No, if you did that on a lower level, if you're like a lower tier, mid tier, so let's say a politician or a commentator or something, and you did that, I think the far likely you do yourself a disservice, because I think it would be easier for the majority of what would be your side to turn against you and say, no, crush him.
Yeah.
Remember that the left doesn't have a majority either. What they have is tacit support through the threat of violence.
I understand that, but I'm saying that you have to have a solid foundation beneath you you have to have the perception of popularity in order to be able to do that effectively.
They didn't always have that, though. That is the point about Lenin.
I would say that what you're talking about is in an in-group sense. In
Yes.
In your own circles, what you do is, you have to reach the point where you say, look, if you're still arguing about the morality of vaccine mandates, you are useless. You are not part of this movement. You are in the way. And I don't think the idea that the left will purity spiral itself into destruction is the most retarded thing that right-wingers say, because the purity spiraling is not a bug, it's a feature.
Yeah, it's how they eject the useful idiots when they're no longer convenient.
Like I said, you need to make up a list of things that you think are moral absolutes, and try and agree them with people. Try and get together and hash out what you think is the moral line where you will take no more, and then remove everybody who is on the other side of that line. That is the only solution.
I would say that the most effective way to do what you just described is to basically be the person whispering in the ear of someone like Trump, someone like Steven Crowder, someone like Ben Shapiro, but he's basically neoliberal controlled opposition, so no.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah. No, I would just say what you're talking about is you take over the the activist side. You take over, like, you become the person that their staffers are listening to. Yeah.
Or you are the staffer.
Yeah.
You are the person that is in the room to suggest something that where, like you go to a Trump rally, rather than Trump say, no, treat them gently like this, rather than that, Trump takes a more aggressive stance and says, no, get them the fuck out of here and do what you have to get rid of them. Mm-hmm. That initiates the first step on political violence being acceptable, should that be the end goal. Or at least the perception of it being acceptable. That initiates it, because you have to have, in my view, the foundation of, like, you need pressure of other people wanting to know, like, oh, well, do you like Trump? Do you like Steven Crowder? Do you like these different people on the right? Do you like them? Are you part of us? Are you part of this group? Are you part of us? And if that's part of it, is one of those people agreeing with the idea of whatever it is, whether it be nationalism, limitations on, immigration or violence, that in order to get more people to moo along with you, it requires someone at the top mooing at people below them.
Well, that's sort of,
yes,
I don't know, maybe
build communities.
Maybe it's a point we've not made, but I think it's because it's the framework we've talked in for weeks, months now at this point.
Yeah.
That all changes in society come from the top down.
Yes.
They don't, grassroots change doesn't happen until it happens overnight. And that grassroots change is always started and is always influenced by elites.
Yes. The point is that you have to, the whole point we're talking about violence in society is that you have to go through the phase, no matter who you are, where you gain power. It doesn't matter what your ideology is, doesn't matter what your ideas are, unless you actually have power, you have no hope of implementing them.
Yes.
So you're right about that, but a good way to do it is to, like, soak into the narrative of wherever you are. It's to basically become like somebody who will not apologize or disavow, and try and get other people, or through that force other people to that position by highlighting their moral bankruptcy of not drawing a line in the sand and saying no further. Because
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so go on, Larry. I was finished.
I was going to say, is it possible that we might be worth ending here and maybe coming back for a conversation another day?
Yeah,
this could go on for another 2 hours.
It could, and I need to get to bed relatively soon, I think.
Well, I'll end on this, at least for this particular conversation, that I think what would behoove people that are on the lower end of things, like all of us, I would say, who are effectively nobodies. We're nobodies, we're not linked up with any political campaigns, blah, blah, blah. We're not staffers for a big politician, anything like that. That what role we could play is defending, through a good argument, actions such as, like, Kyle Rittenhouse, saying that what he did was justified, here's why, and the fact is that we shouldn't say, oh, don't do this. It's like, no, he was justified, and fuck those people he killed. Fuck them. Making good arguments to that degree helps at least our capacity spread the idea. It plants the seed, and it grows beyond just us. That way there's more people that could be in a room, just by extension of somebody that is more influential, to say, well, no, I listened to this person, and I agree completely with them, and you're over here saying, like, oh, Kyle Rittenhouse is a bad guy, or whatever the example is. No, fuck those people. Fuck them. This guy didn't do anything. He was either that or die. What are you even arguing? And I think that helps. Because it always pushes things, it always permeates out. It's like a ripple effect.
Never not gatekeep.
Yeah.
yeah, that too.
I will say that on this topic, just a quick thing to shill. We only have 6 tickets left for it, but we are running an event here in the UK in Manchester on the 23rd of October. We're kind of putting our money where our mouth is, literally. I've paid out quite a large amount already to set this thing up, which we will be recouping, hopefully, but we'll probably be breaking even with this. But we are getting 70 people. We've sold most of the tickets already, but we've got Countdown Killer coming. We've got some community speakers who've announced as well. I'll be speaking there. You'll be speaking there, Evelyn. and it's a good way to like mix with people and kind of create a real life community rather than just an online.
Yeah, it's very cool.
That's very vital about that. So I'll be hopefully doing more of these going forward. I'm starting a new job as well, like the week after next. So I might be a little bit quiet for a little while.
I don't know, I can try and do stuff.
Yeah, or quieter at least. But I'm going to try and keep up with at least the weekly streams. I should at least have time to do that and some of the writing. But yeah, we're doing the in-person thing, so we are trying to actually shift this to the grassroots phase at least, because a lot of people have tried and sadly failed to do that in many ways. But there's a few good people out there.
Trig should also be there, hopefully.
Yes.
I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna need. Yeah.
That's a B, not a maybe.
No, we've got you now, Trig.
Yeah. No.
Anyway,
absolutely.
I'll have to put a line on this one. Thank you for coming on, Louis. It's been a very good discussion.
Yep, thanks for having me on.
And thank you to everyone who's watched and donated. We got quite a few donations there, so that's so good of you guys. And we will see you next time. And that's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him. Bye.
Okay, there we go.